All right, so again, today's presentation is about growing herbs in your garden. Again, this is part of a series that Flint Refresh we've been doing just to educate people to kind of give more in-depth information than we could possibly at some of our other workshops, and to kind of carve out about 30 to 45 minutes to talk in depth on a particular subject. And also, as we've done these workshops, oftentimes I tell people as well that in every county that we interact with or that you might live in, there's a cooperative extension office that's supported by our local university systems. So oftentimes I encourage people to please stop by there, get to know your cooperative extension rep, because again, they have university-backed information and data, and a lot of times they have personnel and a bigger staffing that can also help support your future growth and also further connect you with others within the community. All right. So here we go. Thought that was a question. It was this chat. So herbs. So just a little bit of so how this is going to flow today. There are going to be three core areas that we focus in on. The first half will be focusing more like on background information, how it's utilized in different ways. Then the second part will be more focused on, how to grow it, how to harvest it, how to store it. And then lastly, I'm gonna focus on since I do a lot of community food spaces, I'm gonna focus on herbs that are catered more towards the culinary side and things like that as well. So that's gonna be like again, background information, how it's used, and how to grow it, how to harvest it, how to store it. And then lastly, I kind of go individual culinary herbs that we utilize and recommend in most of our community gardening spaces. So herbs. So most times when you are going into the grocery store, you kind of notice that the herbs and the spices are always like in the same section of the grocery store. They're right beside each other, and that creates a lot of confusion because some people feel, that some spices are herbs and some herbs are spices, but there's like a technical just difference. So herbs themselves tend to be thrive or generated from the leaf of a plant or the flower of the plant. That's the basis of where most herbs come from. Then when it comes to spices, those tend to become from like the roots of the plant, the trunk of the plant, the leaf, not necessarily leaves, but the stem of the plant. That's kind of like grinded down. So when you think of spices, you think of like turmeric. That's a root that's grounded down like to make. You think of cinnamon. Cinnamon itself is a spice, but it generates really from a tree that the bark is like shaved down, and that makes the cinnamon that you guys like need. So it's important as we're going into this conversation about herbs, just understand just a slight difference between like an herb and a spice. So again, most of your herbs are generated from the leaf or the flower of the plant versus the trunk, the root, and things like that. So just like a basic just definition to separate the two between herbs and spices. So most people don't think about this, but herbs actually, they have three different life cycles. So you have some herbs that are annuals. They're very similar in habitat or ways that some plants are. They live in one calendar year. The plant will sprout a seed, it will grow, it would create flowers, it would set a seed, and in that same year, it would die off. And some examples that we use in our garden space are basil, dill, cilantro. So again, within that growing season, it starts from seed, place a flower, and then in that same year, it dies off. You have like some herbs also that are biennial. So that literally means that it can exist for 2 years in the same spot with the same sort of like growing conditions, and it's designed to produce like that. And so a lot of times, again, it grows, but rather than it like dying off from a year, it goes dormant. And then once the weather gets back right in the springtime, it starts to grow back again. One of the few crops that do that here is parsley, but just because of the nature of parsley in our climate here in Southwest Georgia, we tend to put parsley in the annual category. So kind of after it's like ran its course that first growing season, we tend to just to go ahead and pull it up and replant it again. Because what we found here in our climate is that the second year it doesn't quite grow as heavy or doesn't grow quite as strong, and then in a way you just utilize it like wasted like a space. But there are some herbs that I really strongly kind of recommend that people grow, and they're more like the perennials. And so these are the ones that can like live and survive year after year with a little bit of extra care, a little bit extra like just patience and work in those. And so those are the perennial ones. So these are the ones that will grow again like year after year. They're winter hardy, so a lot of times they can survive like our cool climate or our cold weather, mainly because their roots get established. And then once that happens, they'll kind of keep coming back over and over and over again. The main thing that you have to do is during like the winter time or the springtime is just go ahead and like crop it down. Just basically do some basic pruning of the plant. And again, these are very like hardy, the ones that I recommend. So again, oftentimes I encourage people to grow like sage, thyme, chives, and like oregano and like our garden spaces. So again, they will kind of come back year after year with a little bit of TLC. There are a couple others that fit into this category, and I'll discuss them a little bit further when I kind of go into like the individual culinary herbs that you should be growing in your community food plot. So the uses of herbs. And so I kind of break it down to just a couple of different categories, kind of like where you see herbs like mentioned in our everyday living and everyday like existence, of course, culinary and cooking. Then you have your medicinal, your medical herbs in particular, some that are used in cosmetics, those that are used related to like body care and fragrances. You have herbs that are utilized in tea, and as well as like herbs utilized in like as an insect repellent. So I'm going to go through each of these different categories, just kind of give you like a little bit more examples of the different herbs that fall into it, plus just some additional information to kind of help you guys out. So from the medical herb like sort of thing side of things, there's like this documented history. You go back to almost, I don't want to say the beginning of time, but as long as we've been cultivators of natural plants and storing them and find out their purpose, like in our everyday existence here on Earth, that's just documented uses of herbs as medicine. But one thing I encourage people to do is like, just be mindful of the source of how that herb was utilized, and especially being extra careful of, like old folklores, kind of like, Aunt Bessie used to do this, and so we pass it down from generation to generation. And so just being mindful that, some of those old folklores might not necessarily be true. It might be a combination of other factors. And then also I have people just be mindful of, not everything you read on the internet is true. So just kind of taking the time to research things a little bit further. And again, just being mindful of, again, like anecdotal information. So what oftentimes I recommend that people do is take the time to research research-based information, things that have been like tested, whether through like a university or government sources, just to make sure it has some backing on exactly what it says it will do. And that is proven through research and not just somebody's he say and she say. Because as we know, some herbs can be dangerous if not. It's just like any sort of, again, medication. Some herbs can be dangerous if they're not like taken in the proper way or utilized in the proper way, because there is like definitely information that kind of shows like the potential of like some herbs kind of like crossing with some of the medication that people might actually utilize and how it can be harmful to them. So again, I just recommend that you do some research. So one of the things that I suggest is that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, they actually have like a website that's called that. If you type into the search engine, once you go to their site, that's entitled like Herbs at a Glance. So literally goes through like different herbs, and it talks about the different research that's been done with them, talks about some of their medical benefits. Then it also lists some that they haven't quite done enough research and study on. And so that's a good basis if you are looking to grow herbs for medicine practices, to kind of make sure again that it's backed by, like the Department of Health and Human Services, that's backed by a university system. If you're going to really like dive into that sort of world, and again, making sure you understand all the pros and cons and how that herb or herbs with the nest that you're utilizing, and understand the true benefits of it. So again, I'm just not a fan of just because he said, she said, that's what we're going to do, or you really got on the website and it was really motivated and moving you. But make sure that whatever you do, that you back it by science and by research. And it's the same like methodology that I utilize when it comes to us growing food. We want to make sure that whatever we do is backed by some sort of science, because that's a guaranteed way that we can make sure that it's sustainable and we can pass it from like one place to the next. So in case like body care, like this is like the new thing. I swear, like you go from everywhere from like your shampoo to your soaps, to your lotions, like herbs is like mixed in with everything. So here's just some of the popular herbs that you might find in some of your body care products. Again, from like your toothpaste to your shampoo on and so forth. So like lavender, peppermint, rosemary, Calamel, basil, olive, aloe vera, thyme, sage, and yarrow. And so these again are just herbs that you can they've been researched. And what I like about some of these, most of these have been proven to be safe. And that's part of the reason why they've been included in different body care products, different cosmetic products and things like that as well. And then as I go into the herb section again, you can take this list here and possibly find these herbs and be able to create some of your own at-home sort of solutions and body care product. Of course, like the big thing that I think really I was first really exposed to herbs besides in the culinary world was through like aromatherapy. So people utilizing herbs, and essential oils to kind of help improve, psychological and physical conditions for people. And again, most of it has been deemed as safe in environments. But again, like I said earlier, you definitely have to just make sure you understand the herbs that are being utilized and how they could be dangerous if not properly used, or if used improperly, they can be dangerous. So just making sure that you do your due diligence to do research, and make sure you understand exactly what it is that you're mixing and the effects of it and how you intend to like to use it in different spaces. Of course, like insect repellent. So again, you're gonna probably hear me say this a couple more times. Just be leery of like internet recipes or things that people are putting on just various websites. So again, definitely make sure you find university based facts or research-based information from vetted institutions. So in saying all that, there have been two. And when I'm talking about insect repellent, I'm thinking more about stuff that you would utilize on your own personal, on your own skin, around like your family, in terms of like that sort of repellent for like herbs. Not so much in terms of like keeping like pests and stuff away from like your garden spot. So just for sake of that, I just know we have to do a entire different workshop related to animal repellents and things like that in the garden. This is more about your own personal care, your personal space. So with that, so one of them is called is like citronella oil. A lot of times when people in their backyards, they burn these candles, they kind of keep some of the insects and stuff away. It works for a bit, but there's also now citronella type oils that you can actually apply to your skin to further keep the insects and stuff away. It's grown from like lemongrass, which again is like a herb that you can grow in your backyard, not necessarily so much in your cooking, but it is a herb that you can grow. And then they also have what I have a picture of here, which is a lemon eucalyptus tree. And so with that, they take like the leaves, create an oil. That's a better solution. Research has shown we've got these products that have DEET in it to kind of keep mosquitoes and insects away. And we've kind of found like DEET isn't something that you really want children to be around, even adults as well. So this gives you a product that is DEET free. And you could probably find it at like your Targets or your Walmarts of the world, right? Like in the camping supply section. Again, it's a lemon eucalyptus oil, and that is an herb-based insect repellent. So again, it's something that you can use just to keep insects away from you, a natural alternative. Then of course you have like the story about companion planting, and anybody's ever been to any of my gardening workshops, I kind of speak about companion planting a little bit differently than how most people talk about it. And mainly it's just because like I try to keep people away from, folklores, try to keep people away from internet suggestions, anecdotal. I try to direct people in the form of like research proven based information. So there is a lot of research out there related to how herbs can be utilized to keep to help benefit certain plants. Like one in particular, like this picture here. So there's been like research shown about planting chives around like the base of peach trees to kind of help with controlling the peach tree borer that tends to attack peach trees, like the smell of the chives. Research has shown that it can create like an environment where the peach tree borer can be stayed away from. And so again, it's just something that's been proven. Universities have tested it out, and again, it's just I'm a fan of fact versus he said versus she said, because like I think I remember reading somewhere about you can plant like garlic or like onions around squash plants to kind of control like squash vine borers. And if I had like actual proof that was like legit, I know plenty farmers that will be having rows and groves of onion plants surrounded by that squash plant if that was a research solution to control like squash vine borer. So again, I'm an advocate for our university system. I'm an advocate for people doing like research over years to give us like credible solutions. And again, I'm not knocking somebody's suggestion or somebody's opinion about something. I just know I'm very mindful that some environments or some conditions could also be the reason why certain internet-based solutions work, and not everybody's in that same exact climate or in that same exact growing region. But you can find universities that are in your area that are doing data collection over and over again. So utilizing that information as your basis for your growing habit is just a good foundation to have. And so I recommend, that's why I direct people to your cooperative extension office for information versus you just sitting at home and Google searching anything. Because again, the internet now has tons of information, and you can pretty much find anything to sign off on what it is that you think you might want to try to do. But research and data and study, you don't have too much worry about that. It's proven. Then of course, teas, like I think most of us have all had herbal teas in our life. So these are just some of the basics that you could possibly grow at home for your own garden. So you have spearmint, of course, like peppermint, Calamel, lemon balm, basil, lavender, lemon verbena, lemongrass, so on and so forth. So these are just different herbs you could grow at home that you can create your own herbal tea with. Just sit, let it dry out, and then create your own like herbal tea mix. And again, they have like different flavors, different things that you might be that might benefit you, common, and things like that for calming you down. Some give you more energy, some are very just soothing and relaxing. Some just have like a great flavor. So again, I think most of us are, in addition to the aromatherapy, like herbal teas is like another way that we've kind of been introduced to herbs besides being used in the culinary world. But some people might not think about this, but herbs are actually a good attractor of pollinators. We've had herb gardens, and we've had like pollinator gardens that are filled with like native plants. And as you know, with most native plants, they're perennials and so forth. So they might have seasons where those plants are like dormant, but you still have bees that are flying around, still have butterflies that are looking for food and stuff to eat. And so sometimes with some of our herbs, they go to flower, and this gives the bees, the butterflies, and other pollinators food and stuff like to eat off of, and things like that as well. So that's one of the other benefits that even in some of our bee mixes that we do, we tend to also incorporate some herbs just for the sake of when the native plant has went dormant, we still have something for like the pollinators still like to eat off of during like the dormant season from one plant to the next. All right. So again, that was just more like the background information, different ways that it can be utilized, herbs. So now I'm going to just take a little bit more time to kind of think to talk more about planting herbs, growing herbs, and storing herbs. So thing I like most about one of the things I like about herbs is that you have options. You have some herbs you can plant from a plant, but a majority of them you actually can really start from seed. They're fairly small. They're very easy to really grow from seed. And it gives you a little bit more variety, of course, to choose from. But the thing too about herbs, if you ever been to like a nursery, there's one down in Tallahassee that oftentimes I visit called Native Nursery. And so they have like a huge herb selection. And so with that, it can be very, very overwhelming about like what to plant. It's because it's so much to choose from. Like you could pick something like mint, and you might have 20 different varieties of mint. You might have apple flavored mint. You might have chocolate mint. You might have lemon flavored mint. So it gets very, very like daunting in terms of like picking and choosing. And that's why I'm going to focus a little bit more on the culinary side of things. But there's so many different options. But what I tell people is that you don't want to go overboard. And this is like case in point. We do a lot of school community gardens. And so I remember one year, one of the gardeners, they had a 4x4 box, and it was filled with basil. And then after a while, they were like, we have way too much basil growing. Like they couldn't give it away. They couldn't make enough pesto. And so oftentimes what we tell people is that most herbs, you can pretty much survive with just like 1 to 2 plants of that variety, kind of based upon how you're going to use it. Like if you try to do like 16 or 20 different lavender plants or you name it, that could be more than what you need for an individual, unless you're just going into like heavy production. Then in terms of like sun or shade, again, it is a living thing. So it does need like its requirements of, minimum sun, like 5 to 6 hours of direct sunlight. But there are some perennials that can thrive in a more shaded area, but it still needs that kind of core 6 to 8 hours of sunlight just to make sure that its roots have gotten established, that the plant itself is really hardy to tolerate once it gets cool. And so that again just follows like our basic suggestions of keeping it. Now with herbs, good soil is everything. It's just like plants that you're growing. You don't want to try to grow it as something that's really like clay. Doesn't have like some basic nutrients and stuff in it. That's why a lot of times when we're doing like herbs in containers or smaller buckets, little potting soil is like a good mix because that's very, very necessary. And you also want to just make sure that it has good drainage. Doing some research, we've grown lavender in this area with a lot of school gardens and some backyard gardeners, and we come to find out that you got to make sure that it has good drainage. Like it won't thrive like in our Georgia red clay because of the fact that it holds water, it holds moisture, and so you want to make sure that the plant itself is growing in an environment that allows for like the water to run off. And then also what we found too is that if you are going to plant perennial herbs, you want to kind of give it its own separate space. And so a separate gardening space or a separate container, because one thing that you don't want to do is like disrupt your perennial plants with the annual, where you're going to pull it up and disrupt the roots. And so by putting your perennial plants together in one cluster and then putting your annual ones like in another cluster or another bed, it's just really good overall for like your herbs and in terms of like, especially again, making sure they come back year after year. And again, you don't want to like mix up some that you're going to pull and weed, like not necessarily weed, but pull out because they ran the course of their time, again, like your annual ones. So maybe just get in the habit of finding, create like 2 separate herb gardens, one for your annuals and one for your perennials. So just a good habit in terms of how you should plant like your herbs as a whole. And then in terms, like I talked about those perennial ones, just like your basic care, and these also apply for annuals, but this is really related to your perennial plants. So you want to make sure you have like a system of mulching. Putting straw down around like the base of the plant. The kind of, again, we use mulch at a lot of our garden sites. One, to keep the soil cool. Two, to kind of help suppress weeds and things in the area. Three, help with controlling like moisture around like the base of the plant. So mulching is definitely one of the keys for caring for your perennial herbs, but also still has the same benefit for your annual herbs. In terms of watering, we've also found that some herbs, you don't have to water quite as much. I mean, it kind of follows like the basic like rule of thumb that's like most plants start off with, like watering very heavy, light and shallow the very first 7 to 10 days. Then once it kind of gets established, you just really don't want the roots itself like to dry out. But it's but keeping like a good amount of water helps in terms of herbs. But also, like I said as well, some herbs are very drought tolerant, and some of them don't like to be like to have wet feet. And so again, it's just everything's a little bit different, but definitely some watering. And then when it comes to fertilizing, we've actually found that people actually over fertilize their herbs. Herbs really don't need like an extra boost once they kind of get going into the garden space. It's very easy for them like to thrive and grow with the soil mix. If you have like a basic type of compost blend that you're growing them out of, that tends to be more than enough nutrients for the herb to thrive and to grow in its growing season. And then in terms of insect control, because of the smell of the herbs, they actually naturally keep most insects and stuff away. And that's kind of part of where a lot of like the folklore kind of comes in, or the anecdotal solutions about interplanting herbs with different vegetables and how they would keep certain pests and insects away because of their smell. And so like some people feel like, but like how we talk about it, if you have some herbs that are kind of close proximity to like a garden space, it will deter some other insects and stuff away. But there hasn't been like science to say like this will 100%, again, keep away your squash vine borer, but it will help deter, like some of you interplant them in your raised boxes and things like that. So just something to be mindful of. And then we also encourage people to do what we call pruning and pinching the herbs. So this is just a way to kind of help with increasing production, it's a way of kind of like minimizing, just really helping that plant really thrive. So you might like prune it a little bit if it's getting too tall, or you might pinch off some of the flowers to kind of help it kind of go back to producing more leaves as it's growing. But that's just a basic technique to really help that herb plant really grow and really thrive out. Again, just kind of like just take a little bit here, a little bit there. And then in terms of the tool you use, I like to use like your basic sort of like, I call them like a mini shears. There's just small scissors that are kind of down for like design, more for like smaller stem plants, cutting. I mean, you could use like your hand pruners and some other stuff as well, but you just want to make sure you have like a system to kind of keep your herbs maintained and kept, and don't allow for it like to get overgrown and just kind of keep growing without any scissoring or cutting to it. And then in terms of like harvesting your herbs, so again, so you pretty much are just like cutting the stem from like cutting the stem at a certain level, bundling like the different branches and stuff together, and you just have really like two options. You can utilize the herbs like right away, fresh in your ingredients, harvest it right out the garden, put it right in, or you could put it in like a dry space, let it hang and let it dry. And you want to do that process in a more controlled environment, not just like outside in the backyard, letting Mother Nature have access to it. So a lot of times, you hear about people, drying herbs in their garage or particular room in their house, things like that. And it really just helps in terms of like preservation and like keeping the herbs for like a long period of time. And again, there have been like different techniques that people use to preserve like some of like the fresh herbs. But again, I haven't really found anyone that I've become a fan of because again, some of them talk about like freezing your herbs like in ice cubes. Some of them talk about like cutting the stem and kind of keeping it sitting in water so you can always just grab it and stuff like that when you need to utilize it. I'm just more of a fan of like just growing the herbs, finding a place to let them dry. You know, crumbling them down, put them like in a powder format that you can kind of store into your pantry and utilize just as added like spicy, not spicy, but added herbs into your cooking. So I've been more of a fan of like dry herbing for more like long-term like preservation. And again, you'll find that you don't need like a lot of herb plants in order to produce enough for you to be able to have at your home, even to share with your friends in terms of like herbs in your garden spaces. So I'll open it up for some questions. If you do have some questions, again, you can feel free to put them into the chat box and I'll see them as they pop up. But then also you can send emails or questions to info@flintriverfresh.org. And so again, that was like the introductory phase where we talked about background, uses, and then as well as like ways that you can grow them, keep them, and store them. And so that was just like the basic. And in the latter part of this talk, I'm going to go kind of in depth in the different herbs that we grow in our community food plots and just kind of give you a background information of what we grow for yourself as well. So this here is my bread and butter herb. So basil. Again, it's an easy to grow herb. You can grow it from seed. So if you're able to find like some seed packets, again, you don't quite need like a lot of them because they really do produce like really heavy throughout the season, but it is an annual. So this is one of those that, you know, you plant it, then towards the end, you have to be prepared that you have to remove it to like another spot, but it is a warm season crop. So even though, like I tell most people, I plant my basil around the same time that we plant like our tomato plants and our pepper plants into our garden space, because again, this cannot tolerate any sort of like cold weather at all. But you know about basil because it's pretty much utilized throughout most Italian cooking. So in spaghettis, like lasagnas, pizzas, on and so forth. Now, the thing too about basil, it is susceptible to some sort of fungus diseases. So if it does have to be an environment, making sure that, again, that is watered properly from the root, not allowing for moisture to kind of sit somewhat on the leaves. This is one of those ones I'm extra leery about if people are growing it inside their homes because it does need a little bit of air in terms of growing out. I mean, you can do a little bit, but it does need that air circulation so funguses don't come. Then as well, this is the one I was talking about as well. You want to keep pitching the flower to encourage more vegetable growth. But if you do let the flower grow, there's definitely, you get like a lot of attractions from bees coming to it as a pollinator source. And again, this is one that has a lot of different varieties of it that you could possibly like to choose from. So I don't really get too deep into it, but you know, just basic standard basil is just something just to be mindful of. Right. Yeah, I got you, Miss Jane. I kind of found, and I'll talk about that in a little bit when I get to lavender, Miss Jane. So again, Calamel, another one that's utilized in terms of like gardening, herb that people use. Again, a lot of people utilize it really for like their teas. Again, it's another annual, but look how pretty that looks. So you can see why it's a great one for pollination. Actually, the leaf, the flower itself is edible. So people utilize it different ways. But what I like about this is that even though it's an annual, it does a great job of reseeding itself. And so once you get it planted and it's established, like in this area or its container, it will come back every spring. So you don't have to like go out and get like a new plant. You can start off planting this one again by seed. You can cut back the flowers, trim down the area where it's planted at, and then it eventually will come back and it will reseed itself like the following spring. So again, even though it's an annual, the way that it way that it reproduces itself, you can almost kind of have this in a set area as part of like an annual perennial sort of garden plot. And so with that, the other thing like I recommend is chives. So this one here is a perennial. So once you get this established in your herb box, you don't have to really tend to it again. And again, look how beautiful like those flowers look. Again, those are edible as well. And pretty much when you're harvesting this, you're harvesting it from like the ground up. And then you're going to just like, you kind of treat this the same way that you do onions because of its flavor. So a lot of times people will substitute chives in a recipe the same way that they would do like scallions. Again, you're just chopping up really fine, kind of like mix it in. Again, just really great to grow. So they do have some that are onion flavored chives, and then they also have some that are garlic flavored chives that have more of a garlic flavor. So again, this is the one when we're talking about companion planting, putting at the base of like your fruit trees that kind of help with propelling, peach trees in particular, helping propel, helping to get rid of or like to discourage peach tree borers of invading your peach trees. So again, chives is one that we recommend in terms of like your food garden plot. Another one that you can do as well is is an annual, which is dill. Again, I think this is one that we all have got a flavor for, whether it's like dill in your mayonnaise, dill pickles. So again, this is one that you do rather like fresh or dry. A lot of times people have also utilized the leaves, letting this go to flower a little bit and adding this to different like ornamental arrangements, flower arrangements and stuff like that for the smell. And again, this is something that's easy to grow from seed. So it doesn't take up a lot of space. The seeds are very fine, but you can do this as a plant or a seed. But most times when I plant dill, I just do it from like a seed pack because it grows fairly quickly. And then once it's established, you have plenty to utilize again, like in different recipes and so forth. And so just being mindful again that dill is another one of our culinary herbs that we recommend that people have growing in their food garden plot. All right, so going to this one here, lavender. So this again is one that we've been trying to grow a lot here in Southwest Georgia, just because of the simple fact that like lavender is like utilized now in so many different ways. So from like perfume to body products, I've actually been at coffee shops now, and they've been offering like lavender, like in coffee, in teas, and things like that. But the main thing what I found is that it does need good drainage. And it also needs enough space for its roots and stuff to thrive. So in the case of Miss Janie, we might need to take your lavender plant and move it from our 2x10 boxes to more of one of our 5-gallon buckets. This has a little bit deeper space for the roots, and possibly just change out the soil from our container, like our compost blend, to utilize more of like a potting soil mixture for the lavender and stuff like that for it to grow. But it does need to be in full sun as much as possible, because again, it can take some cold, but it can't take like cold. So you kind of want to have it in a space where if you do need to bring it inside, that you can. But again, it is one that if you are looking at a perennial, that you can grow it, but you have to make sure that it's in a space where the roots have enough room to thrive and to grow out. And again, it doesn't like to sit in standing water. And so with our raised boxes that we have like the landscape fabric underneath it, it needs just a little bit more space and stuff like that for its roots and stuff to grow. So just for, trial and error, just learning as we're trying to do this more like in this climate, stuff like that. All right, mint. All right, so with mint, of course, that's your spearmint and your peppermint. Everybody loves mint. It's definitely a herb favorite that most people like talk about. You can enjoy fresh, you can enjoy dried. But one thing I say about mint, it needs its own container garden space. Mint is very invasive. I mean, it will take over wherever it's planted if it's not planted in a controlled container or a controlled box. Like you don't want to plant your mint just freely in a garden or freely in a raised garden box without some sort of extra control mechanism, because it will it will overtake everything. Times I tell stories about how we planted mint at the Flint River Aquarium in the back Golly G garden, and had to take a break for like a month or two. When we came back, mint had literally taken over the entire like herb garden bed. And so what we try to do is encourage people, if you're going to grow mint, to make sure that it is available, that you have it in a controlled box. And so that's just one of the things we recommend when you're doing like the mint products. Like, again, don't just let it grow by itself in the garden. Make sure it's like in a controlled space, because like I said, it needs boundaries. If you don't provide boundaries for your mint, it will take over and nothing else will grow in that spot. And you will spend years on top of years constantly trying to remove it, and you won't be able to do it. Like, so in order for that to not be a barrier in the future, we just recommend that you plant mint in its own separate container, its own separate area, separate space, but it does need, again, like full sun. It is a great thing to grow, especially looking at doing your own teas, things like that for your own personal garden. So oregano, again, this is one that has like a lot of different varieties. We recommend that people mainly focus in like on the Greek oregano. This is, even though it's Greek, this is the one that's utilized a lot in Italian cooking. Again, it's something that can be used fresh or dried. You can let it go to seed a little bit to allow the flowers to be available for the bees to utilize for pollinating. And also there is an oregano tree that's also another plant called oregano that's different than the herb. So just be mindful. But a lot of times when you go to the nursery or garden center, they have different varieties, but we recommend you just get like the Greek oregano, utilize like in your cooking and growing. Again, this is a perennial. So once you get this established, like in your garden space, you can almost, as long as you're mulching it, watering it, doing a little bit of pruning, that this oregano plant will kind of keep producing year after year, like in your garden space. So this is another thing you can use for like a permanent herb garden. All right, then parsley. So again, like I said earlier, parsley does have like the traits to be biennial, basically be able to grow like every 2 years. But we treat this because of like the life cycle. We treat this like it's an annual crop. There are different types. You have like the curly leaf and the flat leaf. The flat leaf is what I have pictured here, and that's the one that's utilized mostly for like cooking. So again, the foliage is nice and beautiful. It does have like a blue flower that again can be utilized to attract some pollinators into your garden space. Mainly this one here, mainly parsley, is utilized a lot more fresh than it is dried, but you can dry it to save like for later. And then also it does provide like a good host plant for your black swallowtail butterfly in its migration throughout the US. So again, it's just one of those things, how herbs can really be utilized as part of pollination in a pollinator garden. Another perennial that we use a lot, encourage a lot, is rosemary. And so again, perennial, once you get it established, it basically grows out to be shaped like a shrub. It can, again, tolerate a little bit of cold, but if we know like some freezing day temperatures back to back are coming up, you can cover it up or you can bring it inside. Personally, I love rosemary, just the smell of it. I think it's one of the most pleasant smells, like early in the morning, just to wake you up. Again, you can do it like in a container, in a bucket, but just being able to transport it just in case the weather, the climate kind of goes like that. Oh, there are different flowers as well. I'm sorry about that. I keep forgetting too, like some varieties do produce like different flowers and different looks to it. So, but it's still quite pretty. And that's what I love about like a lot of these herbs once they kind of go to flower and go to seed. So thank you for bringing that up. Sage. So again, another perennial flower, herb as well. Has like that greenish gray color tone to it. Again, it can be dry, it's fresh, but one thing about sage, this is like that difference of like that breakfast sausage that you have like in the morning. So this is like that ingredient that adds to like the sausage mix that gives it like a unique flavor, but it's also has a very strong flavor. So this is when you want to be very careful in terms of like how much you utilize it in your cooking, because it can overtake whatever is cooked with. So a small dose of sage goes like a long way. Again, it does fall into that same sort of category that we're talking about with lavender. It does like a space where roots can be like free and able to drain out. So if you are going to put it in a type of container for growing it, you want to make sure that it has like an adequate enough space for the roots to be able to thrive and not be waterlogged. And again, this is when a perennial that you literally just kind of cut it back, add some mulch around it during like the winter months. And then in the spring, it will resprout itself, regrow, and you continue to have like sage. So this is the one that you need like a lot of plants on, and it keep coming back year after year and keep producing in the garden space. So then you also have like summer savor. Again, it's just another herb utilized a lot in Mediterranean dishes, Eastern European dishes for a little bit of like flavor, things like that for the region. So if you're doing like a lot of some like curry dishes and things like that, you want to add some extra like spices to it. This is the herb that you would use. Again, it's an annual. So just plant into a space. Again, it's gonna every year you have to replant it, but it does add like an extra like flavor to your cuisine and dining and things like that as well. So thyme, again, another one, like hardy. So this is one of those staple ones I recommend that everybody kind of grows, especially if you're doing a lot of like poultry dishes and a lot of like Thanksgiving meals and stuff like that. Oftentimes, I say you adding some thyme to your turkey, to your chicken, and some of your dressing recipes. Again, it's like a low growing herb, so it doesn't really get tall. It kind of more spreads itself out. You can utilize it dried or fresh. Again, it's utilized a lot, like in essential oils and things like that as well. Again, there are tons and tons of different varieties, mainly for like culinary uses. So you can basically find, I think it's like an English one, like a French one, that you can focus in on. That's the main one in terms of like growing. And again, you just do this as a perennial. You, once the winter months start to come in, just kind of cut it back, add some mulch on the top of it to kind of keep it insulated. And then when spring comes around, it'll start to regrow, resprout itself. And again, it's just like one of those herbs you just want to make sure you keep as a staple, like in your herb garden, and it keeps like thriving and great uses and stuff like that into your space. So open it up for any questions.